Hey everyone, happy Friday. Super excited to have y'all or to be hanging out with y'all on this Friday, especially since this is like our first live stream, our first video on our official YouTube account. So welcome if you're watching from here. Before I let me dive into what this live stream is about. Today we're going to talk about a product called Goose, and we're going into version 1.0. I'd love for Ebony to quickly introduce herself since it's your first time on this channel, and then also Brad, introduce yourself and tell us what Goose is.
I'll go first. I'm Ebony Lewis, developer advocate at Block, and I'm super excited to hear about Goose 1.0. I'll let you take it over, Brad.
Yeah, I'm also an engineer here at Block, and I've been working on this project for a while now. And so Goose is a developer agent, and that means that it's currently something you run on the command line. It'll write code, run commands, and help you build software. And the idea being that as the models get better and better, it's going to take on like larger scope actions and not necessarily be like completing lines of code for you as you're typing them, but really like solving whole problems.
Great description. And I want to just quickly, before we dive into the questions, I always do an icebreaker question, just so like, some live streams be boring. Like I want to like liven it up. So I had two questions. One of them was the audience can answer two. One of them is like an AI question. So what's like your favorite AI dev tool right now? Of course, we'll say Goose, but what's your second favorite? And then the other question, well, I'll save that for later. So answer this question first.
Brad, I'll let you go first.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So yeah, obviously Goose, got to say that. But the second for me is I do have a lot of fun with Cursor, and I feel like those are different modes. So Cursor is great, and then that's the one where I'm like in the weeds and I'm like writing a lot of code myself, and I just want to like bring some like back and forth into it.
Nice. I feel like for me, I'm still like getting into AI. So Goose is like my number one, my only. I don't really have a second at the moment. But yeah. What about you, Rizzo?
I would have to second Cursor. In the past, it's been Copilot because I just know too much about Copilot. But I downloaded Cursor in the month of October, and I'm like really impressed at how good it is. Sometimes I use both Goose and Cursor together. So I'll be like, Goose, can you do this part? And I know that right now, sometimes the formatting is a little off with Goose. So I'll be like, Cursor, fix the formatting. And like, I don't know, it's really fun for me. All right. So, and then my second icebreaker question for y'all. Oh, Angie said, I'm ashamed to say I haven't tried Cursor. Oh, sorry, Ebony, you pressed it at the same time. Yeah. No, they gave it to us for free. Yeah, you guys gotta pay attention. And then my other question to y'all, this is less technical, well, very not technical at all. I don't know if you all are up to date on anything, but there's the Jake Paul, Mike Tyson fight. Who you think is winning? Do you think this is a waste? Like, what's y'all's opinion? Also, people in the comments, let me know.
I'm actually really excited for this fight. That's one thing I love watching is fights. And I think Mike Tyson, I don't know, it's hard because they're both so good, but I think Mike Tyson's gonna have it. I'm not gonna bet money on it, but
I'm not up to date on this at all.
Oh, no.
I'm going to test you on this one. Yeah.
We'll send you the highlights.
Okay.
Wait, are you like, how out of date are you? Are you like, who's Jake Paul? Who's Mike Tyson?
No. I know the names. I just haven't kept up with any of the stuff that's going on right now.
Okay. I think I don't know who's gonna win, but I feel like Jake Paul shouldn't be fighting Mike Tyson. That's what I think. Rooting for Tyson. Awesome. All right, yeah, Ebony, I'll let you go ahead and start the first question.
Yes. Okay. So let me remove the comment. All right, Brad, I would love to know like your top 3 things you're excited about the developers can look forward to in Goose 1.0. Just your top 3.
Yeah, for sure. So let me tell you, like, Goose less than 1.0, 0.x. We learned a ton from building this, and I think one of the things that we knew was going to matter, and we saw it matter, was plugins. So like people had new ideas for what Goose can do. And people got in there and made a lot of cool extensions that we never really anticipated coming along. It happened so much that actually we just realized that this wasn't like as easy to use as it should be. So that's like the top thing that I'm excited about in Goose 1.0 is that the original version, you could extend Goose, maybe not even needing to wait for us to like approve it and get it merged into the main repo. But you did have to like reinstall everything whenever you wanted to do a plugin. And doing plugins, the only way you could build them was in Python. So that did slow down a lot of ideas that people had. And so the next version, we're looking to try to figure out a protocol for how like Goose, the agent, can talk to these like plugin systems that people build. And I think we're gonna actually start calling these systems. And that's gonna let people build the system in any language they want. And it should be in a spot where you could be like prototyping something on your computer and like be in the middle of a session with Goose, have a prototype up and running, and then just say, hey, like let's connect to that and start using it right now.
I love that. And it'll be like more inclusion too. Make it
yeah. So that's the one I had the longest answer for. But let me go through my 2 and 3, which is one, I like I've done Python for a very long time now, and it's definitely my most used language. But as a tool, like a CLI tool or a UX that you want to like share around with people, there's a lot of obstacles for them to get it set up. If you're not a Python person and you don't have Python working on your system, it can break in a lot of ways. And so actually we've had a lot of people have trouble just installing Goose and getting it up and running. So we're excited to be switching over to something that can compile into a binary. And so we can just give this like real nice like download and you can just get it up and running more or less immediately. So that'll help, I think, a lot with people just like getting going. Third is like that same move to make it a binary means that we can ship it along with a lot of other surfaces. So we've had some like really cool development on editor extensions, like in IntelliJ, for example, we've got an editor extension, and that works fine, but you have to do some awkward stuff where you like run Goose in a subterminal, and it's so it like doesn't have this like native extension that you want it to have. And in the same way, if we want to build like an app that actually uses Goose, really difficult today. So the version that we're moving to, it'll be something that we can embed into applications, and then that means that we can have a UX for it or put it into IntelliJ with a native integration. So I think that'll be a lot better and easier to use.
Oh, I'm excited for these because I'm also like, I know Python, but it's not my first language. So I'm actually really excited for that. And I feel like all these changes are going to help with like adoption. People actually go, because the worst thing is someone wanting to try out something and then there's just too many barriers to entry. And you're just like, okay, forget it. I'm gonna move on to something else.
Yeah, so. Exactly. We see a lot of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Excited for that.
Yeah, I'm excited when you posted the discussion post about all the things you were planning or your team's planning. I was like, yes, this is so good. Because similar to Ebony, it was a little learning curve for me. When I finally figured out how to do toolkits, I was excited. But I was like, I don't know Python that well. So I'm kind of just trying to like and the good thing is Python's really readable. So it's like, okay, I can like switch back and forth. But I'm kind of just trying to work through it, but I'm excited to be able to write in whatever language I want, whether it's JavaScript or Kotlin or whatever. One thing I wanted to take a step back about, I think you kind of mentioned it, but I want to make sure that people understand is like, what are toolkits?
Yeah, for sure. So toolkits in the current Goose are collections of tools that like set Goose up with what its actual capabilities are. So without toolkits, Goose is basically just a chat, right? Like, which is useful. The LLMs are really smart, but toolkits let it actually go take actions on your behalf. And also a thing that we learned along the way is that toolkits also have like state to them. So like when you're iterating with Goose on a project, it's really important to not just have like it have to remember everything that happened, but to actually show it like what's going on right now. And so that state is really powerful and something that we're kind of making into a more like well-supported component in Goose 1.0, so that when you build, like, we're going to call it, instead of a toolkit, we're going to start calling it a system. And so a system has tools and then all the state that backs those tools up.
That's really cool. And that was going to be my next question, because I wanted to understand, like, for users, what would be the main difference between the toolkits and the systems? So essentially they'll have like that log of the state, and that's like the main difference.
Yeah, and developing them will feel a little bit different because it's going to feel a lot more like developing a web server. I think actually in Python, for example, which is probably still the best place to build systems quickly, I think what we're going to have is like kind of a Python SDK that makes that real easy to build if you want to use it. But at the end of the day, all you have to do is just make sure that you have the endpoints you need on systems so that Goose can pilot them. And that means you can build it like there's all sorts of clever things you can do. It's less like constrained to how it worked in the original version of Goose.
I'm excited. I love that, like, because we're doing like Goose 1.0. There's so much room for us to grow and add like more features in. So this is really exciting.
Yeah.
Cool. Did you ask the question? I didn't want to take your question. You asked the question about systems to toolkits?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought that was a different question. Cool. Sorry. So just I wanted to follow up with that around the idea of toolkits and all that. Right. So I know that you're kind of making it easier to develop systems, toolkits, which are now called systems. But I was also curious if there's going to be like low code ways. I don't know. I was just throwing this out there. I didn't see that in there, but I'm like, it would be cool if like maybe someone can just type in like a UI and they don't actually have to type out the code or whatever, to lower the barrier even more.
Yeah, we got a couple ideas for that. So one, there's like actually a whole collection of toolkits right now that don't introduce new tools. They just actually give Goose hints for like what it should do. And an example, some of my most commonly used ones are like that. The like GitHub toolkit that I use for interacting with my PRs all the time. It actually doesn't add any new tools to Goose. It just tells it how to use the GitHub command line. And so it's a big deal because it doesn't think to do it unless you like give it the hint. But we don't really need there to be any code backing that up, right? Because it's literally just like some English that you write down to tell it like do some extra, like here's some extra ideas for you. So that kind of thing we're for sure going to have a no code solution for. So that'll be, I think we'll actually probably not even call those a system, but start putting them in as like a more dedicated hints or memory management for Goose, so that we can just say like, hey, I want you to remember these things. So that'll be like fully no code. You just write, throw some thoughts in a file and then have Goose start using it. So that's one half. And then, okay, but then let's say you want to go through the whole thing and you're like, I want to get Goose up and running and talking to like my Google Drive or whatever, but you don't necessarily know how like the Google Drive SDKs work. I think that's a part of like kind of a pseudo no code thing where we actually just like get Goose a whole mode where we tell it all the hints it needs to build systems itself. So you take the original Goose, you like put it in this system building mode and then say like, hey, I want to go like connect you to my Google Drive. It should be able to write the code for that and like at least get a POC working. And so maybe at the end of the day, you write a little code to help make sure it's working well. But I think that could go a long way. And we've actually done that with toolkits in the past on a previous live stream. And I think you can pretty much get a toolkit built without ever leaving Goose. And so I hope it'll be the same for systems.
Yeah, I remember last week when you did the data one, and that made me be like, okay, I get how to build a toolkit now. You can even go back and forth with Goose. And that's exciting of the idea that there'll be parts that you can just have like that memory management. It'll already be built in. I saw Max had a comment here. Can you read it? He was asking if he's spilling the beans. I wanted to wait to it's okay.
Yeah.
Like, everybody knows.
Yeah.
No, that's cool. That's cool. We can talk about that for sure.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so systems, this is a really good point. So when because we're making the agent communicate with the system just over HTTP, that means that for something like development, you do want that running on your like laptop. That's really cool, because it gives it access to your files and it can like work on your like code bases. But that also means that system can be on a remote host, which is, I think, really powerful because we can have people host external systems that are just reusable by everybody. And then you just connect your copy of Goose to that like central system. And that could go a long way, right? Like, I think it could be something that people build out, like, I think in the distant future, maybe not so distant even, but a couple years out from now, people like, this might be a way that you like interact with a business, right? Like they've got like a system that they're running and you can ask Goose to go pilot it. So that would be really interesting. It has a lot of things that people could build out in the ecosystem where Goose can just connect to something that they've built and like have a whole like collection, like you could almost think of there being like an exploration page for Goose where you see all of the systems that are out there and you can just like kind of click around and figure out what you can extend it with.
Ooh, I love that. So I feel like we've gotten to like some really cool like features of Goose. So what are the expected dates for like Goose 1.0 and Goose 1.0 beta? Do we have these dates that we can share?
Yeah, I'll try to avoid being specific because I'll get in trouble. Just because I'll overcommit. I think we're working fast, I will say, and maybe we can demo this later. We have the rewrite written for the back end of Goose in Rust already. Like it's not done, but it is kind of up and working, and so I'm pretty confident that we'll be releasing at least a testable version of Goose 1.0, maybe a beta this year. So we've got only 6 weeks left of this year, so hopefully soon. And then going into 2025, I think the Goose 1.0 is the new default, and we develop against it.
I love that. Okay, so we're hoping the end of the year, or if anything, it's going to be a new year gift to everybody.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I'm gonna be on leave, just refreshing the project, just seeing. I'm like, can y'all do it yet? So I wanted to ask too, right? So like I know that like one thing people have been really interested in, and myself too, is like how Goose is working behind the scenes. And the way that I've kind of like worked through that is I'll go into the repo of Goose and then I'll like ask Goose like what's happening in this repository. But I'm curious if there's any plans to like create design docs or like architecture around like how 1.0 is working so that developers can get more insight, or is that for like a future type of thing?
Yeah, for sure. So I think in the current Goose, if you haven't ever stumbled on it, there is an architecture.markdown in the repo, kind of like an extended README. And I like that idea. In the original Goose, I think it doesn't tell the whole story very well because everything's like kind of the system is like one big application, and so it's like kind of hard to tell how the pieces fit together. That let us like figure out how it should work, right? And so as we go into Goose 1.0, I think we're going to be able to be much more explicit about like what are the key components and how they fit together, because we've actually got a better design about how they are like separated and extendable. So I think we'll do the same. So I'm planning we'll have like a real nice like architecture.markdown that explains how the pieces fit together. And I do think that a lot of this stuff that we're talking about also become like protocols. And so I really want us to like eventually be out in the open source community talking about protocols for agents. And I think that'll be a cool way that this continues to evolve and makes it really clear, like, okay, everybody is agreeing how these systems fit together.
Okay, and now I'm embarrassed that I did not see the architecture markdown.
I didn't see it either. I just went to go look. I'm like, wait, what?
It's but yeah, it's like it's not so easy to follow, honestly, because a lot of the things we had to kind of patch on to how Goose worked as we figured out new problems it needed to solve, and that's why I think a rewrite for 1.0 is so useful.
Nice. You mentioned like Roselle, how like what you'll do is to like ask Goose questions about itself. You'll like go into the Goose repo. I was currently trying to create like a toolkit so that like an introspection toolkit for Goose that it knows about itself without having to do that. But I'm wondering if I should wait until like systems and do it then, or is it like easy transition for the toolkits that we already have?
That's a good question, because I think so. I wouldn't necessarily wait too much, because I think a lot of this stuff will transfer over, and we have like an opportunity to like use Goose itself to do that migration of like anything you built with Goose. Like I think a lot of it will be easy to transfer. But that said, like the new version for systems in inspecting them, again, I think it'll be a clearer boundary in a way, and it'll be a lot more obvious for Goose to be able to say like, okay, like I'm just going to go only look at like this piece of the picture and give you a really good explanation of it.
Love that. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take I know that you said you wanted a quick minute to switch over to the demo. We're going to take a quick commercial break. I mean, you need that moment, right?
No, it's ready. It's ready.
You're ready? Okay, cool. Alex said, I'm not a program, I'm the model itself. Love it. All right, I'll add your screen then, and dive in.
So yeah, let me real quick. We're in the middle of a rewrite right now, and I think a thing that is the one of the big changes is implementing this in Rust, which is going to give us that like compiled binary that's really portable to a lot of different places. So I'll skip trying to read through the Rust code, but very work in progress. But it's all in the open, so if you want to go check that out, it's the v1.0 branch. And so really this demo won't be super exciting because it's all backend, but where we're at now, like I was mentioning, is that this is actually a server that you can run that is exposing the current functionality of Goose as an endpoint. And so something like an IntelliJ plugin or a native UX that we're going to be working on can talk to this as like a Goose daemon that we'll distribute along with a CLI. And so this thing is just available on a port on my local host. And then I can, just send some curls to it and then get that same Goose functionality. And it actually streams the results back to the caller. So this is not intended to be like a CLI by any means. Like we'll have a nice interface like in the existing Goose. But what's going on under the hood is we're using this stream protocol from Vercel so that when we ask it to list files, it chooses to do an ls command, and then we can get the results streamed back to the system, and then also what the model wants to say about those results. And so that's the idea of like how this is going to be portable to different interfaces in the future, and how we can build something like an actual GUI for this system.
This is exciting. That's really cool. And like it's going to be written in Rust, right? Just making sure. So in order to like contribute to like the main repository, you need to know Rust. But if you wanted to add in like your own like other systems and stuff like that, that's when you'd be able to use whatever language you'd want, right?
Exactly. And I think the thing that we're working on with this is that the like core Goose agent, the thing that does all of the operations and figuring out what tools it needs to call and how to communicate with you about them, that's in Rust. Mm-hmm. Our initial system is going to also be in Rust because it's like really tightly embedded into Goose. It'll make it easy for it to be portable to a lot of different places. But the idea here is that this is just like a description of what we want systems to be able to provide to the agent, and that will be available for anything external too. So as long as anything is like ready to like tell us the name and the operating instructions and what tools are available, we can communicate with that over HTTP.
Okay, cool. I'll let you take the next question or comment, Ebony.
I did have a question that I actually wanted to ask before we got into this demo, and I would love to just ask it quickly now. You mentioned that systems will be dynamic. What does that mean for the user?
Yeah, and I can actually show a little bit of code along the way here, which is nice. So the idea with systems being dynamic, before, if you wanted to add a toolkit to Goose, that actually meant that you needed to install a plugin it like I literally reinstall Goose basically with a new plugin enabled. And then obviously any work you were doing in a previous session, you'd have to restart that. Where we're at now is it seems totally possible for Goose to figure out how to operate a system on the fly. And literally what we're going to do is have a way for you to ask Goose to integrate a new system in the middle of a conversation. So you'll be like halfway through using Goose and then you realize like, oh, I actually want to plug in the data system because I need to explore what's in this database. And you can just in the middle of a session say like, add this new set of tools and then start using them.
Ooh. And we got a question from, oh, sorry. I don't know if you're going to.
I was just saying, I love that.
We have a question. I was too ready. We have a question from Matt. I think it's a really interesting question. He says, how do we envision, or do we envision Goose running one server and all UI sharing it, or each one spinning up its own?
This is a good question.
That's definitely something we got to figure out along the way. So right now it would be super easy to just go run a bunch of copies of the backend of Goose. And at the moment, each of them would have like a separate history of like what's going on with like your active files and whatnot. So probably the first version, we start with just the UI spinning up separate copies of Goose. But it is interesting to think about like how that would work if we wanted there to be multiple UIs interacting with the same like memories, right? And that's something that I think we need to do some design. So maybe there's like a centralized storage for memories that all of the different agent copies connect to, and then they can actually like kind of communicate to each other in this like long-term remembering things way. Or maybe we do some more like multi-agent system online that they're all literally running on one instance so that they can actually like collaborate. And I think that's like a design thing we're going to have to figure out along the way.
And then another follow-up question from me is, I know like in the document or the announcement, whatever it's called, you mentioned like editor extensions will be added or maybe improved upon. I know we have the IntelliJ plugin right now, and we have the VS Code extension. I'm wondering what kind of like integration possibilities are you exploring? Are you just thinking of like expanding the current ones, or you're looking for more editors to add? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think and actually Max, who was just chatting with us, is the one who's been doing most of the work on the IntelliJ extension. So I think the JetBrains suite and VS Code would make sense as like a place to experiment with Goose, and that's what seems like a lot of people use. And so those two would be a good start. And then I think also, just as importantly, I think we want to try out a more like native UX for Goose, like something like an app on OS X would be a good starting point. And the idea there being to like get that in front of a lot of people and like let them tell us where it best fits into their existing workflow. And so something like an editor, that's like definitely a good home for like, I'm working on the code myself, I'm writing a lot of it, and I want Goose to like enhance what I'm doing. And then I think there's a whole nother mode of using Goose, which is actually how I use it most these days, which is to give it more independent tasks. And so I will work on something else while Goose is doing something that I am confident it can solve by itself. And so that's like, okay, maybe I need to add a test suite for something, and I more or less trust Goose to get that right. And so I'll send Goose off to do that. It might run on the background for half an hour, and then I come back and I review everything it did. And so that I think is a different UX than an editor, but that's a bit of a guess, right? I'm not sure that's right. So we want to like prove that out, try it, and then get it in front of people and let them tell us what's useful.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting. I like that. And then we have a question from Alex as well. I had a follow-up thought to what you were saying, but when I read Alex's question, I forgot. Alex said, "Why RIIR? I don't even know what that means. Can you please tell me?" Instead of continuing Python 3, most AI applications. Oh, is he asking about the move to Rust?
It stands for rewrite it in Rust. It's a meme. Yeah.
Okay.
In like ACK for sure heard. So I think the key here is that the key challenge that we're solving with Rust is portability. It's not a performance thing, which is why most people look to do rewrites in Rust. And which is a great reason to use Rust for what it's worth. But really, we're like, when it comes to the speed of working with Goose, the limit is the foundational LLMs. The limit is not the code we're writing for the most part. So the portability is what matters. And so if we're looking at, for example, Max working on IntelliJ, currently the current version, you have to like start Goose in like a terminal and just like have people go switch to the terminal. It's not like an integrated environment. And if we make a binary that exposes like Goose's functionality over like HTTP, you can actually build in like a much more integrated experience in the editor. And that same capability that you can now run in IntelliJ, because it's a binary, can power a CLI that we distribute, and no one has to install Python. And also lets us build an Electron app. And so that's like that portable nature of Rust is what we're looking for with this. I think also a thing I should really make clear, because you have a really great point about all the existing libs are in Python, is that that's for the core, which needs to be portable so that we can build a UX. But the systems and like a lot of interesting things you might want to do, like multi-agent architectures, or like just using Python SDKs to integrate with other like knowledge, all of that you can build in Python still, because they're just going to communicate over the protocol.
That clarity is great. And then I'm also curious, or I just wanted to confirm and clarify. We did talk about this a lot, but the different interfaces that we're going to be using are, or that you're hoping to come out with, are like improved CLI, the editor extensions for VS Code and IntelliJ, maybe another one eventually that's more native, and then you'll also have a UI. Am I missing any others?
Yeah. So yeah, just to say that back to you, I think you got it. So we want to explore with a CLI. We're going to keep that along for everyone who just loves CLIs, including me, and also as a thing that you could maybe run as like a GitHub action, or like some other mode where you don't actually want that human chat experience, but you want it to like still use the logic in Goose. Then we're going to have these editor extensions to see like, does this fit well into people's workflows? And that's a bit experimental. And we're going to also try an experimental like native Mac UX built with Electron, I think. And that'll be something where we think we can make Goose a lot more discoverable, a lot easier to use for people who maybe like have never worked with an AI agent before, and also like hopefully some place that we can like do more ambitious like integrations of like visualizations and things like that.
Oh, okay. And I see you're doing something, and
yeah.
Right, that you probably want to demo. And I finally remembered what I was going to say. When you said you let Goose do stuff in the background, I really want to build that confidence to be like, okay, I'm going to let Goose, or figure out what tasks that Goose can independently do while I do something else as well. But I'll let you show us whatever you're demoing right now.
Yeah. I wanted, since we were like kind of talking about the Rust rewrite, I'm using the old Goose here to take a look at the implementation in the Rust code and just like kind of explain it to us. And so it's a better summary than me going through all of the different files. But so it talks through that this like is kind of getting a start at that architecture we were talking about building. And we have the agent that talks to systems, and the systems just define the tools and the instructions for how to pilot the system, and the agent is actually using them in a loop that is going to call tools in the appropriate systems. And then it kind of gets into like, the system registration. And the thing that I think is fun when you use Goose to like explain code for you is it actually does a really good job of talking about like analogies. So telling us here that it came up with a metaphor of like a system is something that a department must be able to do, and an agent apparently is like a manager. That's like decent. It's a decent. It's like operating all of the different systems. Yeah. And then it's also gave us like kind of a Python analogy. So anyone who's used to the old thing, this is more or less the idea of what this code would look like in Python. And we'll actually be able to expose it to Python if we want to do any development against it like that.
Ooh, I might ask it to give me JavaScript versions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead, Ebony.
I love that you like used Goose to help answer this question.
Yeah.
I actually have another question. So like as we like prepare for the release of our beta Goose 1.0, are there any like specific feedback that you're hoping to gather from early users, or any particular like aspects you want developers to pay attention to that you think would be useful?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, look out for betas, because I think we want to, before we officially overwrite the existing Goose in a different implementation, we want to make sure that these ideas we have are working for people. And so the first thing that we'll do is send out a CLI, and I definitely want people to just like get that tested, like make sure that we're not making Goose worse because we rewrote it. So like, does it work at least as well as the old version is critical. And so we'll do that with a beta before we cut over. The other half is that like, do some of these goals actually pan out? So we'll also distribute a beta of the new app as an interface and see if people like using it. And if we get good feedback on that, I think that'll help validate this idea that rewriting it in Rust was worth it, because we couldn't really have shipped an app like that with Python. So that's like another big piece. And then last, what I think will be actually pretty easy, but I want to prove it, is that like people will be able to write systems that extend Goose, and then we'll hopefully have a couple of examples like in Python or Go or whatever language, and see if people have like a success using Goose to build systems in Goose, and then just immediately get them connected and working.
Love that. Is there like a specific place that you would love people to give this feedback?
Yeah. So our GitHub community is perfect for this. I think when we get on the 1.0 betas, we'll drop them in that community post, and then see if people can give it a shot. That would be perfect. And then in general, also, like even if it's against 1.0 and it's on the beta, GitHub issues are great. If you're like, hey, I actually ran into this bug, we would definitely appreciate those there too.
Love that. Thank you. I'm going to just link it too.
Yeah, and I would also plug that maybe that's not like your main place, maybe the Discord as well. That could be a good place for people to chat as well, for outside stuff. Not necessarily for feedback, but just for people if they want to like just talk about something. And I actually have a follow-up question as well. So I saw you write about like the CLI discoverability that you're gonna add in. I'm curious, like what are some examples of like what discoverability is happening? Like, are we getting better discoverability of the commands that exist or the systems, or what is it?
Yeah, for sure. So I think one thing that I'll call out, just because it's like we can do better, and we're planning to, is let me see on this branch. It's in really early. So let's see if I can get this up and running. I had to compile this because obviously it's work in progress. Oops, I got to do that off screen. 1 second.
Top secret.
Right.
I need like a slide or something. Like if it's you doing something, I just like put that.
Just throw it over.
Hold on. Okay. So I'll set this up in a second while I'm talking about it. But one thing is configuration, right? Because with the configuration in the original Goose, we had these files that like worked great for us as like expert users, and then I think for a lot of people, it like just kind of got confusing, and we ended up with whoops, that expanded, gone. We ended up with a lot of different versions of the like profiles that people found hard to interact with, and so I think we're going to switch over to a configure command. I'm not going to keep trying to run it because I think it's I didn't have that prepared in advance, but we have like a configuration that's prompted. So what we'll do with that is have something that's more interactive, right? So that you can like know what all of the options, like which providers do we support, and like if you need to get an OpenAI API key to use it, it'll give you a link on how to go get that, that kind of thing. So just like a dialogue on the CLI. But the other thing that I wanted to, that I can just demo, is like, if you're using Goose for the first time, and you get here, right? And so if you've never used Goose before, like what are you supposed to do? Like what's going on with this? So you just have this totally blank page, and I think it's really difficult to understand, like from here, like what is Goose capable of doing, and how do you interact with it? And so once you get used to it, you're like, okay, like can you tell me what tools you have, and stuff like that. And you can talk to it about it, and you get used to that. And but I think what we're going to do in a UX version of this is like actually like put some dialogues in there and some prompting for the person, so that like they know what they can do, and we can guide them through like a little tutorial or a workflow. And so that this kind of stuff is easy to discover and get started with.
Yay, that's so exciting that it'll have like a little prompt for them. There's some questions in the Discord that got highlighted. One person asks, considering the evolution from basic offline assistants like Clippy to modern day agents like Goose, what are key improvements that make Goose 1.0 more effective for devs and real-time assistants?
Yeah, for sure. So this is a big topic, honestly, and I think a thing that we really one of them is just that the generalizability that the LLMs bring to the equation just changes it dramatically, right? Like, so if you're like in the old world of like automatic actions, it's on rails, and so there's only so many things it can do, and if it isn't exactly what you need, you're kind of stuck, right? Because it just can't help you unless that's the thing that you needed it to do. So with AI, instead of giving it specific actions that it can do and you have to guide it through to choose one or the other, instead you give it general purpose capabilities and then let the AI like put the pieces together to do something that you never expected it could. And so like, since I've got this up, the current version of Goose only has a couple of plans or a couple of tools. Like it has like a way to get some web content. It has a way to edit files and run shell commands and do some planning. That's pretty much it. And but because these are general purpose, it can use those to fit it together into like, I can build arbitrary software with this, and I can like solve like ad hoc tasks, like working with files on my system, or like, you know, editing images or putting together video clips, stuff like that. So that's the big difference, I think, is that like we're giving it low level powerful capabilities, and then the AI half puts them together into like interesting real solutions.
They asked a follow-up question that I don't know, maybe we can answer quickly. It was just that maybe they just jumped in. They were wondering how it leverages AI technology to provide more tailored and proactive support. From my knowledge, it's like using LLMs and then like comes back and talks to you. I don't know if there's more to expand on that.
Yeah. So for sure. So really with Goose, we have under the hood, it's calling out to a foundational model provider. So this is stuff like Anthropic and OpenAI, or if you have Olama set up, you can run like an LLM locally too. So that's like the core of this whole picture. And really what goes on under the hood is that we have all these tools defined that Goose is going to pilot. And the LLM generates like calls to the tools. So the foundational model says like, okay, like you asked me to make a Python demo. What I actually need to do is make a directory and then edit a file to add a Python script and then run it. And so that it breaks it down into like JSON for 3 tool calls. So like, you know, a shell command to make the directory, a shell command or a write file command to create that new file, and then another shell command to run the thing. And that's where the like LLM and AI capabilities come into the picture here.
Cool. Thank you. I'll let Ebony take the rest.
Yeah, I somehow lost you guys. I can't find it at all. Just so weird, but whatever. I'll still ask questions. I just don't know what your faces look like. So I like that we kind of answered that question, and it leads me to want to know, is there anything else that wasn't mentioned? Like any cool feature you wanted to talk about that we just didn't ask the questions for?
Yeah. So with the like 1.0 coming up, I think a thing that we will be working on, but I don't know if it gets into the first release, is we were talking a bit about like context and memory. And it's like really obvious how useful that is, because I tell Goose like like, hey, we were just working on this, and like, here's what we got done, and I have to like type that out myself. And I think that's actually really key to getting Goose to perform well, is that like as a pilot of Goose, I know how to tell it the right context so that it can be productive on the thing I'm trying to have it do. That's like experience I learned along the way working in it so much. And we want that to be smart enough that maybe not everyone needs to learn how to do that, or at least like take the time to do it, because it's actually like a lot of extra typing and a lot of extra thinking. So I don't think we'll have it in the first release, but we're working on that. And I think that's an interesting extension to the agents of like, okay, how are we going to have a lot of context, both about like you as the person using Goose, like what does it need to remember about the projects you have and the way that you work, but also like if you're working at a company, can we give it the context about like what tools does your company use? Are there like internal software that it wouldn't know about from the open source community that you need to like give it some context on, that kind of stuff.
I love that. I love how like specific you guys are hoping that'll get. So my next question is, what are you most proud of that we've like accomplished so far in the current Goose version?
Oh yeah, that's good. This is like, I think I'm really happy that this is in a spot now where you don't have to like, it actually generalizes in a way that I'm like very, very happy that it went as far as it did. And so what I mean by that is like say we're like a common thing we're using Goose on is migrations. And you could imagine building like a really specific migration tool that is like, okay, gonna like kind of like walk through a code base and use like algorithmic approaches to finding all the things that need to be updated. And that exists for a lot of different kinds of migrations. Like if you're moving Java to Kotlin, you can more or less get it to switch over to Kotlin algorithmically. But that tool only does the one thing, right? Because it just does Java to Kotlin. And so what's really cool with Goose is that we can take the same like workflow for doing a migration and then just run it on all kinds of problems. And that's something that like a human can just go ask it to do and figure out. So I'm really happy that like it's powerful enough to like take an idea that one person has in one system and then go bring it to another system, and it just translates and it mostly works.
Thank you for that. I'm going to turn it over to Roselle for us to start wrapping up.
Cool. And thank you so much, Brad, for coming in and talking to us second week in a row about Goose. I'm super excited to get my hands on Goose 1.0. I think I've really appreciated getting to like use Goose over the last couple of weeks. Like I was using it to build a VS Code or add more to the VS Code extension. And I think that part's really cool, how you can like be meta. And thanks, Ebony, too, for co-hosting with me. Thanks for everyone in the audience for, coming in and asking questions and just being engaged. I don't know if there's any last things you want to say, Brad, before we fully wrap up.
No, that's great. Thanks for having me. And like, please do get on the GitHub discussions or in the Discord and tell us what you think. Yeah.
And we also just want to remind them, I want to remind everybody that like there's an easy way for you to earn like a little $150 gift card. Just try out Goose and like tell us about your experience. In the closing video, it'll give you more details on how to join that. But thank you so much, y'all. Bye.
Bye, guys.